Now, when it comes to the code we have to write as a web developer, and when it comes to the programming languages we should use for this, it's worth taking another look at these browser instructions. Because these instructions are in the end just code that's written by web developers and that's then interpreted and executed by the browser. And as mentioned before, for this we're using programming languages which are standardized. And they're also not up to our choice. Instead, there are 3 main languages which you must know as a web developer and which you of course therefore will learn step by step in super great detail throughout this course. Because with these languages, you will be able to control what's visible on the screen and how the website behaves. And the first language you must know as a web developer is called HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it looks something like this. The code looks something like this, but you will of course learn how to write this code in great detail over the next minutes and hours in this course. And HTML is used to define the actual content and structure of this content of a website. And without content, a website is pretty much useless, and therefore that is the most important language. With HTML, you control which text you have, whether you have some images, if you have some input forms where users can enter some data. Things like that are controlled with HTML. Now, HTML is important, but with just HTML, websites would be pretty ugly, because browsers don't have too many default styles built in. There are some, but they're not too beautiful, and therefore a website that uses only HTML would work. You would be able to see the content, but it's not really pretty. That's why as a web developer, we also have another super important language which we must know. And that's CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and which is a language that allows us to define styles for our website, so for the content on our website. With CSS, we control how things look like, if some text is purple or red, if we have a shadow behind some element, things like this. It's technically optional, but of course it is used on basically all websites because we want good-looking websites. Now, last but not least, the third very important language which you must know as a web developer is JavaScript. JavaScript is a language that allows us web developers to add interactivity to a website. It's also optional technically, but with JavaScript, you can, for example, make sure that when a certain button is clicked, an overlay opens up that asks the user to confirm something or anything like this. Whenever you have websites which have a lot of interactivity built in, where things change a lot and so on, JavaScript is involved. And if you think about more complex websites like Google Docs or Google Sheets, which is basically a website that gives you Microsoft Word-like functionality in the browser, then this is still a regular website built with these languages, but we have a lot of interactivity in there. And therefore, here on websites like this, JavaScript, for example, would be pretty important. Of course, not all websites have this complexity, and therefore not all websites might need JavaScript, but of course, you're going to learn it in depth throughout this course, like all these languages and technologies. And you can also see the code written in these languages on any website you're visiting. If you visit a website like Amazon.com, for example, but it works on any website, you can always right-click on that website, somewhere on it, make sure it's not an image though, and then you can view the page source. Now here, this is using the Chrome browser, which is an amazing browser for web development and which is the browser we will use throughout this course, but you have this feature in all browsers. You can view the page source, so the website code, and if you do that, of course, depending on the complexity of the website, you have more or less code that's showing up. Here in Amazon's case, you have a lot of code, but you shouldn't be intimidated by this. Of course, a big team of developers is working on a website like this. But throughout the course, you will learn how to read this code and how to write code like this on your own. And if you would scroll through this code, you do find HTML in there, you also find some JavaScript code in there, and you actually also find some CSS code in there. So these are the technologies that are needed to bring something onto the screen, and therefore these are the technologies which we are going to learn in depth besides other key topics throughout this course.